Good morning. It's 10 o'clock right now, and we're going to go ahead and get the MAG Transportation Safety Committee meeting going. So this is the first item is a call to order. And so I want to welcome everybody to this MAG Transportation Safety Committee meeting. This meeting is now called to order. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on item on today's agenda or on items under the MAG's jurisdiction. If you'd like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a request to speak card located on the counter to my right as you enter the room and hand it to MAG staff. If you're parked in the garage, parking validators are also available at the counter. If you purchase a transit ticket to attend the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. We will now begin the meeting with a roll call of all members. Mohammed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, member of the Transportation Safety Committee. This is a roll call for quorum for the Transportation Safety Committee meeting. Tony Abu, City of Glendale.
Present.
Stephen Bok, City of Mesa. Michelle Beckley from City of Tempe. Hugh Biok from City of Goodyear.
Present.
Kate Drunaski from City of Litchfield Park.
Present.
Thank you. Brandon Forey from City of Peoria.
Austin Kennedy as proxy for Brandon Forey.
Thank you. Frank Ganani from City of Buckeye.
Good morning. Present.
Tara Harman from Pinal County Public Works.
Present.
Raymond Huang from City of Chandler.
Good morning, I'm here.
Shane Kieso from City of Patty Junction.
I'm here.
Carl Langford from City of Phoenix. Sergeant Craig Martin from Arizona Department of Public Safety. Janet Martin from Town of Queen Creek. Mazen Muradovich from Maricopa County DOT.
Good morning, present.
Carrie Osborne from City of Maricopa. Stephen Chang as proxy for Dana Ozioni from City of Surprise.
Present.
Aaron Pinkerton from Tana Gilbert.
Here.
Thank you, Clint. Clint Emery as proxy for Aaron Pinkerton from Tana Gilbert attending. Glenn Robinson from Federal Highway Administration.
Good morning, I'm here.
Thank you. Adrian Ruiz from Valley Metro. Nick Russo from City of El Mirage. Dr. Alice Irvine from University of Arizona.
Here.
Christopher Salas from Town of Florence.
Present.
Sam Taylor from City of Scottsdale.
Present.
Raj Thoram from City of Avondale. Jesse Torres from Governor's Office of Highway Safety. Carrie Wilcoxon from Arizona Department of Transportation.
Here.
Thank you. Have I missed anyone online?
Mohammed, this is Janet Martin from Town of Queen Creek. I'm here. I was just having trouble with my microphone.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Chair, we have quorum for this meeting and the roll call concludes.
Thank you, Mohammed. The next item is call to the audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment that fall under the MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience agenda item unless the chair requests an exception to the limit. So far, I have received 0 speaker cards for the call to audience. Is that the case? Can you confirm, Mohammed? Thank you. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website on June 9th, 2023. Changes were made to the process for accepting and sharing written comments from members of the public not attending. Any comments received 2 hours prior to the meeting have been shared with committee members in advance of the meeting for consideration and will be included in the formal meeting minutes. Staff, have we received any online written comments for the call to audience?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have not received any written comments for the call to the audience.
Okay. We then will go ahead and move to item number 3, which is for information only. MAG's Transportation Safety and Operations Program Manager Margaret Herrera will provide a report on the items of general interest to the Transportation Safety Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Transportation Safety Committee. I'm going to go through my manager's report rather quickly. We have a full agenda today. So a couple of things. I did want to give Glenn Robeson from Federal Highways an opportunity to give an update. Go ahead, Glenn.
Thank you. Well, good morning. So on March 13th, I had an opportunity to help facilitate a workshop for road safety for law enforcement engineers. This was in the Denver area. It was hosted by the Colorado Division of Federal Highways, along with NHTSA. There were several agencies in the Denver area that attended, both engineers and law enforcement. And it was a really good opportunity to see some of the collaboration that's taking place between the engineers and law enforcement. Some of the takeaways, law enforcement, the Colorado area, similar to Arizona, staffing shortages, especially in traffic units throughout the state of Colorado. Same thing with engineers, there's staffing shortage on that side. So the collaboration that's taking place is really a good thing. Fewer staff, more collaboration helps come up with solutions to their traffic issues. So one of the other, in addition to the agencies sharing their collaboration, we did a site visit to this location here, and it's kind of hard to see, but it's a 6-lane arterial. This is an area where one of the Denver suburbs was having a lot of issues with pedestrian fatalities. So working with their law enforcement and their investigators that investigated the fatals, they came up with a solution for the pedestrian fatalities. So I didn't include a slide, but just a really good example of the collaboration. They brief after each and every fatal crash. The engineers aren't necessarily waiting for the crash data to get entered into the state system. They pull it directly from law enforcement. They have access to their records management system in addition to their crash data. So they can stay on top of this, and they have some really good countermeasures that are going into place in this area here. So after the workshop, we sort of asked what the opinion was, and both law enforcement engineers were very much in favor of these workshops. They want to continue to have these. When I returned from the workshop, I did reach out to the Region 9 NHTSA representative, asked him if he would like to partner in hosting one of these workshops in Arizona, and he is interested. So more information to come, but we're very much interested in hosting one of these workshops here in Arizona. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Glenn. Moving on to the 2023 and 2024 project updates. As you can see, we have a couple of larger projects ongoing, the predictive safety as well as the regional priority safety implementation toolkit. There's an agenda item for that one, so I'll forego any detail right now. We are probably within reach of finishing any of our 2023 projects, the local agency safety studies and the Safe Routes to School studies here within the next month or so. As you can see, we're about halfway complete on our Safe Routes to School studies. We're at that point now where we're finishing up some of the community events that are held as part of the scope of work for those projects and looking at starting to develop draft action plans for those. CME AZ, we're about 60% complete on that. Work is ongoing with federal highways and the focused approach to safety to develop a strategic plan for that program. And there is a task force meeting in April for CME AZ. We do have the Scottsdale Local Agency Safety Study that is just now getting kicked off. It's about 5% complete. In addition to that, we are doing some work kind of preliminary to the Transportation Safety Action Plan development to gather some initial data. There'll be a reference to this in Ms. Syed's item number 5 on the work that's being done there. In addition, we have our fiscal year 2024 road safety assessments that we've issued notice to proceed on a couple of those, getting those started here in the next month. And then, of course, we're working on scoping for the vulnerable road user network screening. So just really quick on the Highway Safety Improvement Program process, there may have been some confusion with the April 11th date. I just wanted to clarify that that date is really for you to start coordinating with MAG for your presentations that are going to be held on April 23rd. So you don't have to have your application totally complete. That will come later on in April. So after the safety committee meeting, there might be some questions that you get from the committee that you can provide some enhancements to your application. So you'll have that week to finalize your applications and get them in so that we can then submit them to ADOT on May 3rd. So I just wanted to point out those 3 dates. And then, of course, we have our 2024 crossing guard training workshops. We have 2 tentative dates and 1 firm date. The Peoria West Valley workshop has been solidified on August 8th. We're still working out locations for the East Valley and Central Valley. So we've been working with Gilbert potentially, Tempe, for the East Valley, and then also the city of Phoenix. So if some of you have staff that are working with us and partnering with us on that, if you could get some updates as to dates and locations, that would be great. So we would like to send out the invitations to school district administrators in April. When we do that, we also send copies of that invitation to members of this committee, as well as the workshop planning team, so that they can start kind of letting their schools that they work with know about the workshops and how to register. So all that information, once we send out the invitation, should be on our webpage that we can point them to. And our registration is also typically on the webpage. So just a really big thank you to Peoria, Glendale, Surprise, Phoenix, Tempe, and Scottsdale, and Gilbert. That concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Margaret. All right, so that was a information item. There's no action being taken. So the next item, we are moving to item number 4, approval of minutes for the Transportation Safety Committee meeting held on January 23rd, 2024. Does any member of the Transportation Safety Committee have any comments or revisions to the January 23rd, 2024 meeting minutes?
Chair, Shane with City of Apache Junction. I recommend a change on page 5, be towards the end of that first paragraph, last sentence. It says Mr. Wilcoxon replied negatively. And it just, the connotation that he replied badly. So I think what he meant, from what I remember, is he replied that that would not be the case to Mr. Langford. And Carrie, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I know me, I probably replied sarcastically. But I think that was the intent of that my response. So probably it should be
Okay, I do agree.
with the sarcastic.
No, the other part, so. Okay, so Margaret has noted that. Any other comments that we needed to address? Okay. Continuing on, I have received 0 requests to speak cards for approval of the minutes of the January 23rd meeting. Staff, have we received any online comments for the meeting minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have not received any written comments for the minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the January 23rd, 2024 Transportation Safety Committee meetings?
I move that we approve the amended minutes of the meeting.
Shane will second.
Okay. We have a motion from Kerry to approve the amended minutes and a second from Shane. We will have those participating in the meeting online now take part in the voice vote by turning on by turning on their cameras and unmuting their audio. We need to see the faces of everybody to participate in the voice vote. This is to speed up the voting process. For those who cannot or do not want to turn on the camera, staff will conduct a roll call vote. Staff will only call on those virtual participants who do not turn on their cameras. Members, please leave your cameras on until the vote is recorded so that staff can count people's names whose cameras are not on. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room and those online? Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Mohammed, can you take a roll call of the members participating virtually who did not turn on their camera?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a roll call for vote for the item number 4 for members opting not to turn on their cameras. Frank Ganani from City of Buckeye.
Aye.
Janet Martin,
Approved.
Chris Salos,
I had my video on and said aye, but aye again.
sorry about that. And that concludes the roll call, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mohammed. With that, we have approval of the minutes. We'll move on to item number 5, Proposition 479, Implementation, Overview, and Roadmap. Item number 5 will be presented by the MAG Transportation Planner, Armenta Side. This one is on the agenda for information and discussion.
Mr. Chair, this is Raymond with Chandler. Before we go to the next item, I can only see the room, but I don't see the presentation. Is that just me or is that everybody see the presentation?
I'm having the same problem. I just sent a note asking why we can't see the screen.
Thank you for bringing that up to our attention.
Mom is working on that right now. Thank you.
Can you see now?
Can you folks that are online see the presentation now?
Now I do.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Arminta Syed. I'm a planner here at MAG, and I'm here today to provide an overview and roadmap for the implementation of Proposition 479, otherwise known as the extension of Proposition 400. This is quite a lengthy presentation. We've presented it at a number of our prior committees, so a few of you may have even heard the entire presentation before. Thank you in advance for bearing with me. Because of the volume of information, I'm going to approach this a little bit more informally, where I pause periodically, address any questions that may have come up by members. If I don't pause and you do have a question, please feel free to interrupt. So before I get into the actual overview and roadmap, I want to go back a little bit, provide some context. After nearly 3 years of plan development, we were able to come forward with a comprehensive investment plan, which is known as the Regional Strategic Transportation Infrastructure Investment Plan, or the RSTIP for short. It's also often referred to as the investment plan, and that was unanimously approved by the MAG Regional Council in June of 2021. Fast forward to last year's legislative session, we were able to get an enabling legislation through that session. It's also known as Senate Bill 1102. And then that following September, we brought forth some conforming changes to the RSTIP to align with some of the requirements set forth in Senate Bill 1102. And what the RSTIP really is the basis for any improvements that will be funded through Proposition 479. So what does the RSTIP really consist of? There are two overarching categories. Firstly, you have these defined projects. They're shown here on the map in front of you. These are your freeway projects, your arterial street projects, some high capacity transit projects. And then the other category is what we call programs, safety program being, of course, one of the programs that are included. And these are really set aside buckets of funding. This is one of the main differences as we move into Proposition 479 and the RSTIP. Not only have we increased the number of programs, we've also increased the amount of funding allocated to these programs. And the logic there is that it really sort of helps the region be flexible as the needs of the region change over the 20-year horizon of the sales tax. By setting aside these programmatic buckets, we can be nimble and flexible in responding to what those changing needs are. So when it comes to timeline, what can you expect with when the implementation of Prop 479 will take place? Well, today we're here, March 2024. Later this year, we'll have a pretty big milestone in that the Proposition 479 measure will be on the ballot. Following hopefully a successful passage of that measure, when the current Prop 400 ends in December 2025, we'll immediately be able to transition into Proposition 479 in January 2026. So you might be asking, that's almost 2 years away. Why are we talking about implementation now? There's a pretty long lead time when it comes to the work that needs to be done so that we can start as planned on January 2026. These are things like capital project considerations, and then also some transit service considerations. And I'll just provide some examples to put that into context. So when it comes to capital project considerations, there are really 4 main phases of project development that need to occur. They start with the scoping and environmental phase, which is really that high-level development phase, that preliminary engineering phase. There's often environmental work required if there's federal funding associated, and that can take a substantial amount of time. Following that, you move into final design where those concepts under the scoping phase are refined, often simultaneous to the final design effort, or even can be concurrent, is the utility work that needs to be done and the right-of-way that needs to be acquired. All of these three phases need to be complete before then moving on to the final phase of construction. And so I'm going to provide some examples of different projects that vary in scale. You can see that despite the fact that they're of different sizes, they all still take a long amount of time to develop. So what you see here are some examples of freeway projects under the current Prop 400. Freeway projects in nature are typically larger of size, but even can vary within that. You know, you have a TI or a bridge replacement. Those are typically smaller in size. You have, you know, these larger freeway widening projects. They can consist of up to widening, you know, 26 miles of main line. Those typically take longer. But what you can see on here is in light blue are the time it's taken to move through that scoping environmental phase. And then in gray is the time it's taken or we expect to take for the final design and right-of-way phase. And so, you know, putting this into context of where we're at now versus getting ready for Prop 479, we would have missed a lot of our timeline. For example, you know, the Loop 303, the new freeway that's the southern extension from I-10 to SR30. If that was, for example, scheduled to start January 2026, and we're just starting to develop today, we would have missed our deadline. And so I'll get into it a little bit later, but thankfully a lot of those efforts have already been initiated, at least on the freeway side. When it comes to even arterial projects, which are quite large, but typically a little bit smaller than freeway projects, that development time, that right-of-way acquisition, design time, it still takes a while. A lot of the considerations here are the funding source that is funding these improvements. Typically with federal funding, as I had previously noted, there's a few more requirements that are that need to be done to move through that development phase. And so often there's still quite a bit of time it takes to develop. And then even when you have, you know, what you consider perhaps a simple project, paving an unpaved road, again, that, you know, funding source, where that project is located, et cetera, it still takes a good amount of time to develop. So on average, you know, despite the scale of these projects, it still typically takes about 2 to 3 years on the front end so that we can be ready for implementation as of January 2026. And then when it comes to considerations with transit service, unfortunately, it's not as simple as, you know, just putting a new bus route on a map. There are a number of other factors that need to be worked through. First of all, Valley Metro has a very comprehensive process that they lead to put together their short-range transit program. And so any service changes have to be included as part of that process. And through that process, they consider things like, will there be impacts to neighboring jurisdictions? Are there buses available? Is there a driver available? Are there contractual obligations that we still have to meet? And of course, ADA requirements. So again, just to bring that point home, why are we talking about implementation even well before the election this fall? Well, first of all, we want to make sure that the funding that's allocated in the RSTIP is being used efficiently. The more delayed the projects are, the more risk there is of that cost escalation because of inflation. We also want to maximize the benefit of these projects. A lot of them are, I'm sure most of you are familiar with, required today, yesterday, and so want to make sure that they're not delayed any further than they need to be. We also want to, a lot of this work, a lot of these projects, they're going to be delivered in collaboration with our partners, Valley Metro, who implements the transit portion. And so we want to make sure that there's adequate time to give our implementing partners, our member agencies, time to work through what these changes are. And then also, there is a lot of federal funding that's allocated in the RSTIP. Federal funding is use or lose. And so we want to make sure that we're set up so that none of that federal funding that's allocated to the region gets lost. Okay, so before I get into the actual what's in the plan, I'll pause here and see if there are any questions. Okay, I will move forward then. So what's actually included in the RSTIP? Well, when it comes to all the different revenues, you probably hear the most about the dedicated half-cent sales tax. That's a massive portion of it, but it also includes all of the other funding that's allocated to the region, whether that's, federal highway funding, or, state funding through HERF or federal transit formula funding. All of that is housed in the RSTIP, which really serves as the home for all of these different funding sources and sets forth the policy of how the funding will be allocated. And then we have different management tools to deliver the different components of the RSTIP. So first of all, you have your freeway lifecycle program. That's the tool that helps deliver those defined freeway projects, and those are ultimately implemented by ADOT. You have the transit lifecycle program, the management tool for those transit projects. That's implemented by Valley Metro and member agencies. You have the arterial lifecycle program. That's the management tool that houses the arterial street projects, and that's implemented by member agencies. And then finally, you have all of those competitive programs, again, implemented by member agencies. So I'll start by providing a little bit of overview on each of the life cycle programs. So as mentioned, there are 3 life cycle programs: freeway, arterial, transit. The good news with this is that these are the same life cycle programs that exist today under Prop 400, and they will remain the same number of life cycle programs as we transition to Prop 479. I'll start off with the freeway lifecycle program. I'll start by giving a little bit of context as to where we are today, what's the current status, before we talk about, next steps and what's required to transition into the freeway program that's under Proposition 479. So when it comes to the program of freeway projects under Prop 400, it's very well defined. We know exactly what projects are left to be delivered, what scope elements are included, the funding that's been set aside for them, a schedule of when we can expect these projects to come online. And that freeway program is funded through 3 main sources. That would be the dedicated half-cent sales tax, the federal highway formula funding, as well as a portion of HERF. When we think about transitioning the Prop 400 freeway program to the Prop 479 freeway program, this will probably be the easiest transition of the 3 life cycle programs. The reason being that this is the program that has the longest amount of history. It was the only program that existed under Proposition 300. And so because of that, there is this historic precedent set. There's this great relationship with ADOT. And so all of that will continue on to Proposition 479. And by and large, the framework for how the mechanisms of the freeway program function will remain the same. And then, as I had previously mentioned, because of the long lead time for these massive projects that are included in the first phase of the RSTIP, which is from 2026 to 2030, we earlier this year And as well as last year, got approval from regional council to initiate some of these development efforts. These are for these big projects that you're familiar with, like SR 30, State Route 24, the Loop 303 widening, the 303 I-17 system interchange upgrade. So looking ahead, what are the steps that need to be done as we transition to Prop 479? Well, first of all, with both revenues and project costs, those were developed back in June 2021 when the plan was put together. So of course, those need to be updated to reflect current forecasts, current costs. And then also, what we need to do is work to put together a schedule of implementation for those near-term projects. So in the RSTIP, these defined projects are broken into phases 1 to 4. But within those phases, the actual sequencing of the projects is not yet set. So for example, with all the phase 1 projects, we don't know which projects are going to go in 2026 versus 2029, for example. And so that's something we're going to need to develop. And so you can expect these efforts to be initiated after the last annual update of the current freeway program, the fiscal year 25 freeway program. That is expected to occur by June of this year. Okay, I'll take a quick pause. Any questions about the freeway program? Okay. Take a sip of water. Okay, now I'll touch or I'll provide a quick overview of the arterial program. So again, I'm going to follow a very similar sequencing where I'll start with talking about where we're at today. What do we need to consider as we think about tomorrow? So with the current Prop 400 arterial life cycle program, very similar. There's a very defined set of projects left to deliver. There's funding set aside. There's a schedule in place for those. The funding for these projects comes from both the half-cent sales tax as well as some federal highway formula funding. The arterial life cycle program under Proposition 400 was originally, the way it was put together, it was intended to be a reimbursement program, but because of the way, by and large, because of the Great Recession and a number of factors since, what we're seeing is that the project development has caught up to the funding in that the development work is now occurring simultaneous to when the funding is available. So when we look to comparing the arterial program under both of the propositions, the main change is the shift in funding source. Under the current Prop 400, like I mentioned, it's the half-cent sales tax and the federal highway formula funds that fund these arterial projects. Moving into Proposition 479, it's just the allocation of the half-cent sales tax that will be funding the projects that come out of the life cycle program. And so as we think about transitioning to Proposition 479, there are still some questions that will need to be answered about the current Prop 400 and how that program ends. So for example, some of the questions that'll need to be answered include, how long should the Prop 400 funding be available? There are projects slated for construction in 2026 that will not be finished by 2026. And as happens with all types of projects, there could be complications that get in the way. So how long really should we make that Prop 400 funding available? And then secondly, do we consider merging the two programs under the two propositions, or should they be kept as separate standalone projects? There are benefits and cons to both. Benefits such as we could start, if we combine them, we could start developing some projects under Prop 479 now, but there are complications like that change in fund sourcing that make it easier if we keep the two programs separate. And so as we look to transition to the new program, we'll have to do a lot of similar things as we will with the freeway program. But most importantly, we'll have to start by setting some updated policies that reflect the new Prop 479 arterial program. Then we'll go and do a similar thing where we update the revenue forecasts. We'll also update the funding amounts allocated to these projects. Questions that'll come up are, how do we consider incorporating the impact of inflation? That will really look to the development of the policies to inform. And then similarly, we'll have to come up with that implementation schedule of how these near-term projects really get sequenced. And so the steps that will follow specific to the arterial program and that transition is that number one, we'll form a working group of member agencies who will then provide feedback and inform or provide recommendations on policies on how the current program should be finished. And then that'll be, of course, brought forth to our bigger policy committees for their approval. Once that has been completed, we'll be able to move into development of Prop 479 policies. And then again, that'll have to be brought forth to policy committees like Transportation Policy Committee for final approval. Any questions on the arterial life cycle program before I move on to the final life cycle?
Yeah, this is Sam Taylor. Thanks. I had a question. Those tasks that you mentioned on the previous slide, how long do we expect that to take before we can start like new projects in Prop 479?
So I'll talk about it a little bit further. The arterial one is particularly interesting because there's the life cycle component, and then we will have arterial competitive programs. And so a lot of the focus this year is going to be on setting up those policies specific to the arterial program, because there are a lot of questions that need to be answered before we can go on and start considering the implementation. I'll talk about schedule a little bit near the end, but what you can expect is, I think that conversations are already underway to convene a working group of member agencies, at least to talk through the end of the current Prop 400. And then we'll look really to this fall to start developing those policies on the Prop 479 arterial program. Anything else on the arterial life cycle program? Okay, let me move on to the transit program then. So the transit life cycle program under Prop 400, again, a very defined list of, or very defined program of transit services and capital improvements that will be funded through the end of Prop 400. But this is going to be the biggest change as we transition to the new transit program under Prop 479. One of the biggest things is that under Prop 400, Valley Metro is responsible for the management of the transit lifecycle program. That responsibility will shift to MAG under Proposition 479. So here's a graphic that shows the different components that are included under the transit program in Proposition 479. There's several components of it, and they're kind of almost their own standalone sub-programs. So I'll just go through and provide a quick overview of each. So when it comes to the bus operating assistance, this is one of the biggest shifts going from Prop 400 to Prop 479. We're going from a fixed model to a performance-based model. And so developing what that framework looks like, how that new performance-based model will function, will require a lot of work ahead of time before we can move forward with this program. Working, of course, in partnership with Valley Metro to establish the parameters. Valley Metro will be leading a comprehensive operations analysis, which will, of course, inform what the new bus operating assistance looks like. Part of that does include some seed funding for new emerging routes. When it comes to express bus, commuter bus, or regional transit facilities, there is a prior technical study that MAG had completed in partnership with Valley Metro, the 2020 Regional Commuter Bus Feasibility Study. That will need to be updated to reflect the latest market conditions. And based off of the work that comes out of that, that will inform where there's need for these services. So then we can really start to put together the new express bus program and transit facilities such as parking ride lots. I just want to mention that this is a very technical focus. There will be a lot of policy conversations that need to occur. Which of those needs do we fund? How much funding do we put forth? That will be policy conversations that will be need to had in partnership with Valley Metro and also at our policy committees. When it comes to ADA services, the shift with Proposition 400 to 479 is that the regional funding available to the ADA program will only be available for the ADA services that are strictly defined as such by the federal definitions. And then with regional services, this is by and large a documenting effort where we'll just continue to fund a lot of the commitments that previously existed under Prop 400. Okay, so when it comes to bus capital, similar to Prop 400, we're going to continue the policy or process of where the region 100% funds any bus capital purchase needs. When it comes to transit asset management, we'll be working in partnership again with Valley Metro, City of Phoenix to document what these asset management needs are and how to fund it over the life of the program. Things like the current Farebox effort that Valley Metro is working on. Preventative maintenance, again, a similar thing where we continue the current efforts under Prop 400, where 25% of the region's 5307 funding, which is an FDA funding source, will go towards preventative maintenance. And then high capacity transit is very similar to the steps that we talked about with the freeway lifecycle projects and the arterial ones. Essentially, we'll be following a similar set of steps where we convene a working group, come up with the policies that serve as the framework for this program. We'll have to go through, update the revenues, update the regional funding amounts that are allocated to these projects. And then, of course, come up with a implementation schedule for those near-term projects. Any questions? Anyone want to ask a question so I can drink my water and take a breath? Okay. I'll move on then to the competitive programs, which is, of course, the last sort of management tool that I had talked about included in the RSTIP. So this is a good slide that summarizes what the changes are to the competitive program buckets going from Prop 400 to 479. Really, the main thing is that not only will these programs be funded through federal funding, but now there will be a portion of the sales tax funding that will go towards these competitive programs. And that will essentially allow us to meet that increased funding that was identified as a need, but also help deliver these projects faster and more efficiently. Here's a list comparing the number of programs under Prop 400 to Prop 479. As you can see, under Prop 400, there were 3 competitive programs. Those 3 will continue, but then we'll have an addition of 5 new programs bringing the total to 8 competitive programs. So looking ahead, what can you expect in the near term or next steps as we get ready to implement these competitive programs? As I had previously mentioned into, the conversation we had under the arterial life cycle program, there's also competitive programs for arterial rehab projects and arterial widening projects. These are actually federally funded, and because of wanting to ensure we don't lose any federal funds that are allocated to the region, we'll be giving priority to setting up the framework for these 2 programs initially. And so that, again, similar to all of the other program policies we're developing, will be done by a working group of member agencies. And so that call for projects, we're actually hoping to do this fall 2024. And so there is a lot of work being done right now so that we can get ready for what that will look like. And then when it comes to some of those other competitive programs, there will be some technical work required on the front end to inform what will actually be included in those future programs. So when it comes to the active transportation bucket, updating that regional active transportation plan, I believe the current one was last updated in 2018. And then a similar thing, 2015, the SM&O plan, the system management and operations plan, was last updated in 2018. So looking back at these current plans that haven't been updated for a while and updating them to the current time and day. And then in particular with safety, we want to spend a lot of time focusing on transportation safety, not just within what the safety program will look like, but how it should be considered across all the different programs. And so a lot of the policy discussions that will occur this spring, summer, fall, a lot of that will feed into informing the strategic transportation safety plan. Oh, excuse me. And so a lot of that technical work and other program development needs to occur so that it can ultimately inform updating the safety plan. Any questions on competitive programs?
Sorry, this is Sam Taylor. Question, the arterial rehab and arterial widening programs, are those new programs? They weren't in.
That's right. That's correct. And so now you have an arterial life cycle program, and then you have 2 additional arterial competitive programs. The life cycle program is now going to be sales tax funded only, whereas those competitive programs will be federally funded. And that's just to help ensure more efficient use of the funding sources and making sure that projects that are better aligned to be implemented through federal funding versus sales tax funding are properly being managed, essentially.
Are they going to be managed by MAG or by ADOT or like the HSIP? Is that going to be similar to that? Or?
So they'll be managed by MAG and then ultimately implemented by the member agencies. They'll very much focus or function the way they are now, where the life cycle program will likely get, updated on an annual basis based on feedback from member agencies. And then the competitive programs will, a lot of this will be defined as we move through the conversations this year and working with member agencies and, what they want to see and what they think is best, but it will be more of that competitive call for projects.
Thank you.
Of course. Anything else?
This is Carl Langford with City of Phoenix. One question I have regarding kind of the safety strategic plan and kind of the competitive nature with the safety. Do we know if they're going to be similar to kind of our road safety program or the RSP projects at the moment, or something totally new?
At this point, they haven't ultimately been defined yet because we want to have feedback like with this group and other member agencies on what they want that new program to look like. But we expect that to be defined as part of those conversations that occur through the rest of this year. Did I miss something, Margaret?
No, I think that that's pretty accurate. So I think to the point of having the conversations with the policy committees is what do we do with that $20 million in each one of those fiscal years for safety? So it could be that there would be, you know, some kind of allocation of those funds for something that looks like an RSP program. But in addition to that, there could be also, as Arminta mentioned, we want to focus on safety throughout all of the competitive programs. And so there might be some of the funds in some of those other buckets that will include safety improvements as well.
Any other questions? Okay, so to summarize all of that information I've given you, efforts for all of these different next steps, things to consider as we transition will be initiated soon. Priority will be given to a lot of those technical activities because those will then inform the policy framework that needs to be developed. Policy items specifically that will be considered this spring will of course be the Prop 400 ALCP policies and procedures update, in that how will the current ALCP program end? Of course, that it needs to be done sooner rather than later so we can focus on the ALCP under Prop 479. And then of course, that leads to the arterial competitive programs, the widening, the rehab programs, and then also because they have that federal funding component, making sure that those funds get utilized efficiently. And then policy items that will be brought forth this fall will be the new Prop 479 ALCP policies and procedures, as well as the new Prop 479 TLCP policies and procedures. And then, of course, as we move through all these different efforts, all these working groups, these conversations, MAG's commitment is that we will be sure to provide regular updates to our technical and policy committees throughout the process as appropriate. And that is the conclusion of this very lengthy PowerPoint, but I'm happy to take any questions and hope that just sets a level of expectations of what you can expect to happen between now and January 1st, 2026. But I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Ms. Syed. Does anybody have any questions or any additional questions from either the members here in the room or those online?
This is Sam Taylor. I had one more question. So regarding the ballot measure, I heard some talk about it needing more than majority approval. Is that true, or does it need?
I have not heard the same thing, but I can certainly make sure to follow up and double check and make sure my understanding of that is correct and get back to you and confirm. But as far as I know, I think it's the standard ballot measure, as with other measures that will be on the ballot this fall.
Okay. Do you know if it's a statewide item or is it just a county?
It's just a county item, since that the tax is really coming from the county sales tax.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Hearing none, staff, have we received any online written comments for agenda item number 5?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have received one comment for this agenda item, which has been provided to the members in advance of the meeting for consideration and will be included in the formal minutes of the meeting.
Thank you, Mohammed. This is an information and discussion item, so there's no action that will be taken. I will move on to item number 6, the update on the development of the Regional Priority Safety Implementation Toolkit, the RP SIT.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Transportation Safety Committee. I just want to verify that we have Kendra Schenk attending.
Yes, I am here.
Wonderful. So Kendra and I are going to be tag teaming this. This is a project that was initiated through the acceptance of the 2020 through 2030 Strategic Transportation Safety Plan. One of the discussions that we had at this committee as well as with the stakeholders is that if we wanted to promote all these high value countermeasures, it would be a great idea to kind of put all of those countermeasures in kind of one spot that could be easily accessed either by you all or your management to kind of look at how we want to include safety in really any project. It doesn't have to be solely a safety funded project, but really any project that you might putting forth in your, for instance, your CIP, right? So we did put the project in, we submitted that for approval, and it was approved by Regional Council back in May of 2021. Soon after that, we started working on a scope. This is not necessarily something that has been done before, so we had to do quite a bit of research and trying to figure out what we wanted for the scope of work to be advertised for proposals. We got about 3 months down into that, and there was just so many questions that we had that we couldn't answer, and none of our research really could answer. So we decided to kind of put that scoping on hold. And we did about 5 months of one-on-one input sessions. And to those of you who participated in those, I want to thank you again because your work in answering those, 17 to 24 questions that we had some really great conversations with all of you that really fed into the scope of work that was ultimately proposed on. So what we heard at during some of those, we had, as I mentioned, about 17 questions, but the key questions really were, what would assist you all in communicating the importance of including safety into your project planning process, right? And what we heard was case studies and infographics, fact sheets, things that are easily digestible as well as understood, something that you can take to your manager, something that you can take to your city council. In addition to that, what should the toolkit do, right? How could it help you? And that would be, making it able to be integrated into your CIP process, help you assist with decision-making and buy-in, giving options for improvements, as well as enhancing that engagement with other of the departments in your agency when you talk about what you're going to be including in your CIP projects, and that safety being a priority. In addition to that, the other resources for successful use of a toolkit, one of it was obviously training videos. If you happen onto the webpage, you want to know how to work through the toolkit itself, we'll have that. A feedback loop if you have an issue, if you have something that you'd like to suggest to be included into the toolkit, having that feedback loop, as well as being user-friendly and also some cheat sheets or checklists. So with what we heard, the goal we set for the RPSIT was to provide those resources to all of you to make safety elements part of those planning discussions. In addition to that, adopting safe system in all transportation related projects and agencies region-wide, which will also lend to defining safety priorities through the region and also enhancing or advancing regional culture of safety. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to Kendra. Kendra, just let me know when you want me to advance slides.
Perfect, will do. Thank you. So yes, we were brought in as the consultant working on this project. So we kind of took over after MAG had done a lot of the legwork and doing the initial input sessions and some initial research and kind of started setting the stage for what the RP sit could look like. So really what we wanted to do is make sure it consisted of countermeasures that would work from this region. So there's a lot of countermeasures out there, but what's being implemented now in the region. It's going to be web-based and hosted on the MAG website. That was really important that it was kind of a living tool. And like Margaret said, it will have the case studies, guides, and tutorials. So one of the starting points that we had for the process, we selected 2 tools. The screenshots are shown here. The first one was the Safe Transportation for Every Pedestrian tool, the STEP tool, kind of looking at how that was used. It's entirely web-based and is very specific for those pedestrian countermeasures. And then an international tool, which is the IRAP, the International Road Assessment Program, has a pretty robust website about different countermeasures and their effectiveness. So we kind of looked at these 2 websites, formed the technical advisory group for the RP sit and asked, what do you like about these 2 tools? And got to some information to help us shape the RP sit itself. Next slide, please. So what we heard from that advisory group, again, member agencies from Glendale, Peoria, Tempe, as well as MAG staff, because it was important that MAG staff have say in this as they're developing the tool. They're going to host it on their website. But one of the things we heard, or several of the things that we heard from these website examples, we want to have some tool tips. So again, you don't have to have a PhD in safety to understand how to use the tool. We want everybody to be able to use it regardless of their level of safety knowledge. We want to be able to identify countermeasures, even if we don't have all the information known about a site. Maybe we don't have traffic counts, or we don't know the specific, if there's speeding issues, but what can we get even if we don't know all that information? We want to provide some clarification for countermeasures. One of the countermeasures that's being recommended in some of the RSAs is installing raised curb. We want to provide some guidance as to what that looks like, why we would use that, what its kind of effectiveness does it have. Again, similarly, we want to eliminate that technical jargon so that we're not requiring safety knowledge to use the tool. The tool also is going to have a sortable list of countermeasures. So we have options to sort by effectiveness, by cost. It could be sorted alphabetically. We have all different sorts of options. So it's really geared towards the user and how they want to use the tool. And then we're going to develop these case studies. One of the really exciting parts of this is we're looking through your CIP and identifying what kinds of projects that maybe are not rooted in safety, can we run through this tool and demonstrate an effective use of the RP set. Next slide, please. So to start with the process, MAG did a fantastic job and reviewed over 100 road safety audit assessments in the region and pulled out, I believe it was somewhere around 1,800, some ungodly amount of number of countermeasures. Some of them were duplicative, but pulled out all of these countermeasures and we broke them up by crash type. So applicability by crash type and by the different types of intersections. So right now, the way the tool is focused is it's focused on the intersection. There's a lot of things in the tool that in the future can be advanced, including converting to segments, things like that. But for right now, this initial version of the tool is focused on our intersections. So looking at all the different crash types, correlated different countermeasures to those crash types, and having unsignalized versus signalized intersections, because there are differences in that. Some overlap, but also some very distinct differences in our countermeasure types. So we've sorted all of our countermeasures. And then next slide. And then the general process for the tool is that the user is going to select some inputs. We're calling them prompts. We haven't landed quite on the terminology yet, but they're going to select a series of inputs about the intersection. Again, maybe they don't know everything about that location. There's an option to put unsure. And then it's going to supply a list of countermeasures based on those user inputs. And then from there, the user can refine that list based on an actual assessment of the location. So really a couple things we wanted to do here. One, we didn't want to make it a big black box where the user inputs everything and outspits 2 countermeasures and boom, go implement those 2 countermeasures. What we really wanted to do was give them a robust list of countermeasures that maybe they're not considering. Maybe they haven't considered that in the past and they want to they should be considering it now based on their characteristics. And maybe there's situations we can't accommodate. We also didn't want to have 1,000 prompts that a user needs to input. So maybe, you know, a quick look at the intersection and it says, oh, we already have that countermeasure. We don't need to implement it. So that was kind of our ideas behind the general process of the RP set. Next slide. So these are an example of some of the prompts. You can see we tried to be scientific when we needed to be, but also tried to be very general. Is there bike lanes present? Is there a sidewalk? Is there speeding issues? So again, not all of this information may be known, and that's okay. We have options for that as well. Next slide. So here's an example of the different countermeasures that may be filtered based on the user inputs. We have the countermeasure name, we have the applicability, so when might it be considered, what other factors should be considered when you're implementing this. Costs may be an issue, right-of-way might be an issue. You may need to do additional traffic analysis if you're going to say go to protected only left turns. Maybe you need to do additional traffic analysis. We've tried to provide an additional level of cost. Obviously, you know, improving overhead lighting as an example has a wide range of costs. Maybe you already have access to power, so you may have a lower cost. Maybe you already have lighting and you're just upgrading it. That's a lower cost than putting in brand new lighting in an intersection. And then we've also identified some effectiveness, high, medium, or low. In this case, this is all high, but these are based on the latest research. What if we're putting this in, what kind of bang for our buck might we get? Is it going to be highly effective? Maybe it's really expensive, but not really effective. Maybe we shouldn't consider that option. Next slide. So then this is kind of where the user will then be able to input. They'll get that list of countermeasures, and then they can provide a discussion of, you know, maybe we already have protected left turn phasing. We don't need to implement it. Automated red light running as an example here. Your jurisdiction doesn't allow it, you know, that sort of thing, but at least it's been considered. It is brought to the forefront for consideration based on your intersection characteristics. Next slide. All right, so to test this process, what we did for to kind of test our theories and our countermeasures, we looked at 10 intersections, 8 of them signalized, 2 unsignalized across the region. These were road safety assessments that were done for the MAG region. Countermeasures from those reports were pulled into the tool. And so we really looked at a wide geographic, diverse set of intersections, bus routes, rail lines, different varieties of intersections to kind of test our theories and our process here. So if you go to the next slide. So what we saw, our top 3 crash types were rear end. Well, we took the top 3 crash types identified for each of the RSAs. That is shown in the chart there. So we had 29 different iterations based on the top crash type. So one RSA only had 2 top crashes. So you can see most of them are rear end, left turn, angle, side swipe, having to really do with an intersection there. When we looked at how many countermeasures were generated by each intersection, about 44 countermeasures for signalized intersections and 27 countermeasures for unsignalized intersections. And like I said, our top crash types were in angle, left turn, which makes sense being at an intersection. So that's what we used to determine our testing here. On the next slide, this is kind of our results to kind of compare. And what we're showing here, the gray boxes are how many countermeasures we got based on doing this test. So that's what came out of what would come out of the RP set is those gray bars. The orange line is showing us how many countermeasures were recommended in the RSA. So you can see there's a very big difference between what was recommended in the RSA versus what was recommended by the RP sit. And then that blue line is showing just how much more, how many more countermeasures are produced from the RP set than from an RSA. And again, what the goal of this is not to say, well, we produce way more countermeasures. It's not about the quantity of countermeasures. It's again, to kind of change the thinking, making sure that no stone is left unturned, so to speak, when we're looking at different countermeasures. And so just because the program identified 40 countermeasures doesn't mean all 40 of them are applicable at that location. That's on the user to think about, to consider, but eliminate those specific countermeasures. So it's really, in my mind, a good process that still puts a lot of, gives the user something to think about, but allows the user to have the freedom to make those decisions. One of the other things I really liked about this graph is it really shows the pedestrian and bicycle differences. So we have a lot more pedestrian and bicycle countermeasures that maybe have been traditionally considered, which I think is a really good thing, especially with that being, so prevalent in the MAG region. So that's something that the RP set will do as well. Next slide. So just an example output. I don't expect you to read this. It's ineligible legible there, but what we're looking at, we also have, when we put out these countermeasures, we have some sometimes consider, and we have some that are always consider. And so these are the always consider, we believe, are really highly effective, something that should be done regardless of the crash problem out there. These are things like making sure that we have signal heads aligned with travel lanes, those things that are not quite maintenance activities, but are just something that is good practice, making sure that we are doing our part to prevent crashes as much as we possibly can. So those are the always consider, those will pop up. And again, the user can decide, maybe there's a reason that the signal heads are not aligned over the lanes. Maybe the mast arm isn't long enough, and to align the lanes is going to be, several $100,000 to get new mast arms, and we don't want to spend that. That's fine. We can explain that, but at least it's something for consideration. Next slide. So here's where we are in our schedule. Right now we're in the, we've done the input sessions. We've looked at the countermeasures. We've compiled all of the countermeasures. Now we're in the final stages of doing the tool framework. We're basically creating the brains of the tool that will then go to MAG for coding for the MAG website. We have a prototype of the website that we're currently in process of developing, and it looks really, really cool. So very excited to share that with you when it's ready. So we'll be transitioning into that web-based tool development this spring and into the summer. We'll be doing some beta testing with some of the local agencies in the summer, fall timeframe, and we'll be developing our guidance materials and finalizing those guidance materials later this fall and the winter, with the goal to be completed by February 2025. So the tool will be up operational and have all of the materials for it later, I guess, early next year. And I believe that was it.
It is.
Perfect.
So yeah, one of the things I wanted to just clarify is that this first tool, version 1, that we have to call it, is based on the road safety assessments that were done at MAG. We, in the future, are going to be expanding it to include data from Safe Routes to School studies, traffic signal optimization program projects, and possibly even in coordination with ADOT, getting some data from more rural characteristic roadway safety assessments, so that it can be a lot more robust toolkit. So right now, this is just focusing on intersections, but in the future, we hope to continue to expand it to meet even more needs of our both rural and urban member agencies.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Margaret and Kendra. Do any members have questions or comments? Go ahead,
Yes,
Sam.
hello, Tony. This is Sam Taylor. I had a question. At the beginning, we talked about like making it more user friendly and so that people who aren't necessarily traffic or safety professionals could use the tool. However, at the end, it seemed like you would need to be a professional to kind of go through all the different recommendations and countermeasures that were proposed by the tool. Because I don't, you don't want someone saying, "Oh, this tool told me I should do this thing, and so we just did it," without really thinking too much about it. It seems like there's a lot of solutions that are going to come out of this that aren't really applicable or can't be used or can't be utilized, and you need someone that really knows what they're doing to go through that and say, no, we can't do this, or we can't do this, or I don't know.
Do you want me to take that one, Margaret?
Yeah, why don't you start and then I can add, and Tony had a comment as well. So why don't you start?
Okay. So basically that's a very, very good point. I think our goal with this is that what comes out of this toolkit, none of them, in my opinion, are bad ideas. I think all of them have the potential to improve safety. But what it comes down to is feasibility of doing those improvements. So maybe you don't have to have a knowledge of safety specifically, but as a CIP manager, knowing the feasibility of being able to put in dual left turn lanes, as an example, like on the picture on the screen here, putting in dual left turn lanes, would be a detriment to the property, adjacent properties. It's going to be very expensive. So having that sort of knowledge would help with that. So explaining that it's not so much, I guess, dual left turn lanes in the northbound direction. The southbound already has it. But the point is that it's providing a list of things to consider. Not everything has to be implemented, but hopefully it's not knowing safety, it's knowing projects and knowing improvements and budgets and feasibility.
Thank you, Kendra. And the way I was looking at this was, well, at least from my perspective, and Margaret or Kendra can correct me. The way I was looking at this is this will throw out tools for the folks doing the review out in the field. It does not take away from us having to make decisions after the fact on the feasibility of these solutions that are being proposed. Because I looked at, the output that came from the test site, and it had everything in there. But I mean, one still has to sift through those, and I think they are a good point to start the discussion. But it's not intended that it'll give you a magical answer at the end of the day. So.
Yeah, I would just add that one of the keys here, key word that Tony just said, is discussions. And so, prior to this, or how we operate now is that, you propose a project to your CIP manager, and sometimes some of those safety elements, they get removed from the project for whatever reason. So one of the key elements of this is being able to take something like this, and again, some of the jargon is going to be taken away, so you can have an easier conversation with your manager or with your teammate that you're proposing a CIP project for. Is just starting to have those discussions to include safety in all of these projects, which is something that's hasn't really been done before, giving you a conduit to start having those discussions at that level, at the planning process level.
Are there any other questions, comments? Oh, Gary.
Thank you, Chairman. And Margaret and Kendra, thanks. This is a great tool. I really like the direction it's going. The one thing though that I think probably, well, actually there's two questions. I think one of them you probably answered, but I assume that this is protected by 407, or we would have to have some kind of language in there that would keep it protected. The other thing, and this came up when we developed the AZ step tool, was the one word that was missing from the discussion was documentation. You've got a lot of different things that, could be considered and should be considered, but it would be also very helpful if the output was in a form that could then be responded to, like an RSA. And that way you'd be able to say which ones you agree with and would move forward, and which ones you wouldn't and why. And that way you aren't left with any kind of, list of things that could be used against you, but yeah.
Yeah, no,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, you're exactly right. What Margaret has shown here is an example of one of the reports. We've actually been in process with the IT team and the web development team. There will be a PDF report. The way this is going to work is there'll be, at the end of putting in the tool inputs, you'll put in your email address and you'll get emailed a report with all of the countermeasures. The benefit is within the tool itself, we've actually included a toggle that you can toggle on or off and says you're going to use it or not use it. And in the report, we haven't figured out if it's going to be 2 separate reports or 1 report, but it will have the countermeasures that you're going to use and the countermeasures that you've considered but eliminated, and provide or place for documentation as to why that was eliminated from consideration. So there will be a PDF report that will be provided for each location that runs through this tool for that exact reason, to be able to document and lend to more discussion. And some of the discussion can be very simple. Already has it done, or it's been tried, or costs, or whatever, different things like that.
Yeah, I think that'll definitely help. And just the standard RSA protocol, and when you return or when you reject a countermeasure would be good to remind people of.
Yep.
Yeah. It's good.
Okay, any other comments, questions? I see Sam has another question.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
one more question. So you mentioned at the beginning, like maybe if you don't have a lot of site details, that you can still get countermeasures out of this. Is there still going to be the option to put in the site details, like the specifics that maybe will narrow down the list? So
Yes.
have like 50 things on there.
Yes, absolutely. So the user will be able to put in as little or as much information as they have. So maybe every single category, all the traffic volumes, and all of the issues, and you're out doing an RSA, so specifically, maybe you don't have the measured speed, but you're out there and you've heard and you see that speed may be an issue. You check that box. So yes, there's the less information you get, the more countermeasures you're going to get out of it. The more information you put in, the fewer countermeasures you'll get. So it's kind of going to narrow it that way, but didn't want to make that prohibitive for anyone that didn't have the data. The other thing too is a lot of our inputs that we've included, aside from some like volumes and other characteristics like the speeding issues and things like that, we have made it to where a lot of it hopefully can just be captured from Google. Ideally, if you're doing an RSA, you're going to be out in the field, so you can do it in the field. And that was the benefit of having the web page, that you can actually pull it up on your phone and you can do it while you're in the field, put these answers in. And so the idea behind that was you could do it in the field, but if you're a CIP manager, let's say, and you're not going out to every single location, if you just pull up Google at your desk and put in the information you have, you still get some solutions to consider that maybe are not considered before.
I just want to make a correction to something that you said, and I don't know that you intended to say it, but I just want to make sure that it's clarified that I think it's very important that the more information you put there, I wouldn't say the fewer countermeasures that you're going to get, the more appropriate countermeasures that are applicable is what you're going to get. So it narrows that down to what the program or what we think would be the more appropriate responses. So I don't know necessarily that we're looking for fewer, but the more information that one puts in, the better the results or more appropriate results that you're going to get.
Yes, that is correct. Yes.
So like, what is the minimal amount of information you can put in?
I mean, you could literally just put in that you have a signalized intersection. It'll give you every single countermeasure, but you could put in that you just have a signalized intersection. That's obviously challenging when you have that many countermeasures. But like I said, most of it, hopefully, you can go through and put and just say, well, I've got a turn lane, I've got a left turn lane, I've got a right turn lane, I've got driveways within 250 feet. My intersection skewed or offset. I've got sidewalks, I've got bike lanes. So hopefully those can be done with Google and at least get that information. But then, yeah, literally, I mean, literally you could run the tool and just say, I have an unsignalized or signalized intersection.
I guess that kind of goes back to Sam's comment about, being careful about letting anybody use this because I really think there's a lot of professional judgment that needs to be included or involved or, and data. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
We can't do that. We got to base it on something. So
right.
Making it too simple and user, for anybody to use is a danger as well.
Okay, any other comments?
Part of the beta testing is going to be actually going out in the field and doing an RSA with this.
Yeah, we've got you slated for that, Carrie.
Pardon me?
We've got you slated for that.
Excellent, excellent.
For that portion of beta.
One other comment. And this is something that we discovered when we got the when we did the step tool. And I don't know if I may have missed it, but it does help to be able to print out the sheet, and you can just go. If you don't have it on your phone, you can just print it out and go down the list.
Yeah, that is one of the outputs that are going to be available for this. Yeah.
I think ultimately we want to get it into either a phone version or a tablet version that you get there. But like I said, this is, we're just starting on this process. So, so there'll be just like your phone updates or iOS updates, or for those with Androids, it will keep getting better and better. So I have received no request for speaker cards for item number 6. Staff, have we received any online written comments for this agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have not received any written comments for this agenda item.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. As this is an information and discussion item, there's no action that will be taken. I move on to item number 7. This is the ADOT. Oh, this is the ADOT statewide network screening, and it will be presented by the State Traffic Engineer Kerry Wilcoxon. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, you're right next to me, so it's not really a move. That's okay. Well, thank you. We wanted to give an update on the network screening that we run annually of the entire data set, crash data set. This is something that we start working on in usually the fall of the previous year, fall of 2023, and publish it about the end of the year. In this case, we published this in January, I believe, of 2024. But most of you have seen this before, and so we'll just run through this as quickly and as painlessly as possible. We had introduced this concept of the circle of safety about 5 years ago, and where we look at the sort of a virtuous cycle of evaluation and investigation, design and construction, and then reevaluation. For the network screening part of it, we compiled the latest 5 years of data, and we are specifically looking for the areas with the highest number of fatal and serious injury crashes. But we're able to look at it from both the statewide and the local system in most areas. We look at intersection segments and ramps on the intersections, segments and ramps for both the state and the local system. The caveat is we aren't able to segment or break up the segments in any uniform manner. So we don't actually network screen local segments. The segmentation that we look at is broken up by mile on the state highway system. Once we're done with the list, we send this off to the various parties who are involved, and we're looking for a actionable countermeasure. And what we want here is to recognize the process. We're not going to jump to conclusions. We're not going to say, oh, you have a bunch of angle crashes, so we must put in a roundabout. That may be a hunch that you have, but you really can't determine if that's the appropriate countermeasure until you go out in the field. So we are looking at these specific countermeasures, either work orders, road safety audit, capital improvement projects. As I mentioned, we run about 8 different network screenings, intersections, signalized, non-signalized segments on the highways, on the state highway system only. High lane departure crash segments on the state highway system only, and then ramps on the state highway system only. Then we also look at the most common fatal and serious injury in crash types, and those common fatal and serious injury driver violations. And once we produce those listings for the state, we then break them up into district listings, ADOT district listings. We'll also break them up into any smaller version, cities or counties, or tribes for that matter as well. We send these out to the regional traffic engineers and the district engineers, as well as the locals. And we ask for them to look at it and to respond back to us what they plan to do for these. Now, we obviously can't demand that the local agencies send us back to that, but we do want to give them heads up because these documents, while they're not made public, are discoverable. The RTEs and the district engineers come back to us with their countermeasures, or with what their plans are, not countermeasures. And then that goes into our annual network screening report, which will be produced usually in the late spring, early summer of the following year. So for this most recent network screening, as I said, it was completed this January, but it included 5 years of crash data right up through the pandemic, during the pandemic. For the non-signalized intersections, I won't dwell on any one of these because this is all available to you. But you can see a list of locations that ranked or where they ranked. We also talk about the preliminary or the primary fatal and serious injury crash type. And importantly, where it ranked in the last 5 years of network screening. And a lot of them you can see weren't even on the network screening prior to this. So there's a lot of variability. And if you look at the number of fatal and serious injuries crashes that it takes to get to the top of this list, you can tell why. Thankfully, we don't have a lot of fatal and serious injuries at any one of these intersections, but it does mean that the list fluctuates quite a bit from year to year. Moving on to the non-signalized intersection from the state highway system, same kind of thing. The only difference here is that anything you see in red, not highlighted, but where the text is red, that is an area that's been identified, or an intersection that's been identified as a potential road safety audit location. And we'll be determining later on whether we want to send out an ADOT team to look at those, or whether we want to hire consultants for that. For the local signalized intersections, again, you can see the listing here, and new to this is the ownership of the particular intersection. where it is located, and of course, what district it's in. And again, there's quite a bit of variability on this list as well. Signalized intersections on the state highway system, same thing here. And then we move to segments. And again, because of how we have to break the segments up, we only do segments on our state highway system. And again, the same notes here that anything in red is something we've identified as a potential RSA location. All the other information has been discussed. For violation types, this is pretty much always going to look like this. Failure to yield, speed too fast for conditions, disregard traffic signal, those are going to result in your highest numbers of K&A crashes statewide. But what we do, and I don't think we show in this presentation, is that for the highest violation type, we will then find the locations where that was the highest number of fatal and serious injury crashes for that violation type. And we will display that on the listing as well, or at least in the report. And if that is not already covered by one of the other locations or one of the other listings, we will consider that for an RSA as well. Same thing with violation, or excuse me, crash types statewide, and crash types statewide, we do the same thing. We'll break this up and we will highlight the areas or the locations that had, for instance, the highest number of left turn crashes. And if it's not already covered on one of our signalized intersection or unsignalized intersection listings, that would be included in one of the RSAs. As I mentioned, we break this up and do a mini network screening for each of the ADOT districts. And we develop a hotspot map where these locations are. This again helps with us when we identify locations or areas where we're going to do RSAs. And then we put all that information together into a network screening report to management. We do a monthly RSA review, and the rest is history. Any questions on this?
Thank you, Carrie. Does anybody have any questions for Carrie Mazen?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Margaret, Gary, thanks for the presentation. I think it's very, very beneficial to have such a report. As relates to the jurisdictions which you've indicated in the report, as far as Maricopa County, McDOT versus Maricopa County, it would be probably beneficial to us if there we could actually try to identify McDOT as a separate jurisdiction versus Maricopa County itself, because everybody's Maricopa, and a lot of investigating agencies sometime in the report shows that maybe that's related to McDOT. I wonder if there's any way that we could work with your staff in order for us to identify the limits of McDOT through GIS basis data, so that we can maybe help identify those in your report to the benefit of everybody. Just a question on the table to see if that's possible at all.
Sure. Yeah, Mazen, that's a great question. I think there's a way to identify it in part. As you know, a lot of the locations in that are controlled by McDOT may be fully owned by McDOT or fully under the responsibility. There also may be, and I remember with Phoenix, there were a number of intersections where McDOT had one leg and the city of Phoenix had three. And of course, when I was with the city of Phoenix, all of the bad things were happening on the McDOT owned locations. That goes without saying, yeah. Yeah, I think we could probably do something like that. It may not be 100%, but we might be able to do this. So just follow up with me and we can try and figure out how to approach that. It's a good question though.
I just want to go on the record that that may have been one of your sarcastic comments, so doesn't make it in the meeting minutes.
Yes, let the record reflect that that was a sarcastic comment.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
Yes, Chair, this is Sam Taylor. I recently heard that some jurisdictions have, maybe not related so much to this presentation, but I've heard that some jurisdictions have stopped recording property damage only crashes. And I was wondering if is like a commission or as a committee, if we can, there's anything we can do to kind of persuade them to continue recording property damage only crashes. Just in the sense that you know, in safety research, we often look at different surrogate methods because we don't have enough crash data, and I think, you know, a property damage only crash is better than a near miss or something like that. So anyone else had comments on that?
Maybe we tag team it, but so we had heard a couple of years back that there were, I know Tucson has stopped recording PDOs. So we did some effort through the SunCloud project, which we'll probably have a presentation on that in May. The data that was put into the SunCloud's another really great data portal that we have. But when we were doing some research for that, I guess we did do some coordination with ADOT and found that really no other MAG member agency is not recording PDOs. I think it was just Tucson. Do you know any differently, Carrie?
I don't really know anything differently other than the fact that there's going to be less. Obviously, there's already filtering going on of PDO crashes. They're not being recorded unless in a lot of cases because of staffing. I had heard that Mesa was moving in that direction, but I don't know if it's never been confirmed. But I think regardless, that's probably the way of the future, that PDO crashes will be reported less and less frequently, simply because of the manpower it takes to send a police officer out to a minor crash and then write a report. I don't know if there's anything that the safety profession can do about that other than try and compensate as much as possible. I know that there have been studies that have where they've looked at the knock-on effect for communities who don't report PDO crashes or who don't investigate PDO crashes. Does it affect, for instance, the number of possible injury crashes that get reported, or does it affect the number of possible, of severe injury crashes? I'm not aware that it has an effect on those crashes, but as far as getting an idea of overall how an intersection or how a segment is being used, there's going to have to be some work done to sort of identify where or what is likely missing in the data if you have a reason to believe that a significant number of PDO crashes are not being reported, whether by policy or whether just by circumstances.
Are there any other comments or questions?
And
Oh.
Carrie, I believe that list was sent out about a month ago. Is that accurate?
Yes, it was sent out about a month, I think early February.
Okay.
Did it come from you or did it come from somebody else?
It would have come from Saroja
Oh,
Devarakonda.
Saroja.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Kerry. I have received no request to speak cards for item number 7. Staff, have we received any online comments for this agenda item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have not received any written comments for this agenda item.
Thank you, Mohammed. As this is an information discussion, there's no requested action. And I move to the item number 8. This is for information only. I would like to invite any members of the Transportation Safety Committee to report on ongoing safety-related project activities in their jurisdiction. We will begin with those here in person, and then Mr. Shahid will use the roll sheet to request member reports from those attending virtually? I guess I'll go ahead and get started. Glendale has nothing to report this month.
Ada just has the ongoing call for projects for the HSIP. Margaret mentioned that the ones for MAG are due to MAG by early April. The official call ends on May 3rd, I believe. We're interested in looking at that. We are following a new process this year with the requirement for scoping of all projects that we're going to be beginning later this year, calendar year. And then I did want to mention that we are also in the process of setting up a group RSA on high passing zone, high fatal and serious injury passing zone crashes statewide. And we're going to be trying to use some of the moving line of sight technology to test out that the value added for that RSAs, but that'll be probably later on this year.
This is Mazen Muradovich, Maricopa County DOT. Just want to share with the committee about a recent, kind of summer of 23 demonstration that was done on our road. So this is around summer 23, Virginia Tech Transportation Institute conducted a demonstration of the SCRIM friction testing device on Maricopa County particular road segment. This is a briefly Federal Highway Administration initiative to encourage the agencies to go through the testing and finding out the friction location that's would identify problem locations. So using the SCRIM devices, it's just sideway force coefficient routine investigation machines. These actually were test the road continuously and provide network segments and level data. This actually, the idea of this is that to better understand and predict where friction related crashes occur on the highway. So briefly, why it was significant to McDOT is that we wanted to know the difference between the lock, wheel, skid, trailers, which is the normal common testing devices that's used by most agencies, versus the SCRIM. And also we wanted to particularly look at those high friction surface treatment locations, which we have in McDOT. And it was revealed to have some significant information, which is very, very valuable. So I think it was very worthwhile doing this test. And I think, I believe also on behalf of Gary, the state of Arizona also were involved in that at some point, but we did that at the same time. So it's just a very interesting observation, and it just reflected a lot of really bad spots on the roads that's going to identify potential friction testing done, or maybe projects on our roads. So there was a good opportunity for us, just sharing that information.
Thank you, Mazen.
Nothing from Federal Highways.
Nothing from City of Scottsdale either.
Shane with City of Apache Junction. Just one item. Last couple months, we have installed a few new crosswalk locations at our rural arterial roads where we have some higher frequent trail crossings as well as horse riders. Also, we made an improvement to existing crosswalk in our downtown district, and which includes an RRFB. So that's a first for the City of Apache Junction. Look forward to see how those do. But all these efforts, again, are efforts to make better options, better safety for pedestrian, including horse riders, bicyclists in Apache Junction, and look forward to continue doing such improvements, as well as looking at lighting throughout the downtown areas as well. Thank you.
Okay, anybody on the virtual side, did you call up on them?
Right. Kathy Hollow as a proxy for Michelle Beckley from City of Tempe.
Thanks. I don't have anything to report this month. I'll let Michelle report next month. Thank you.
Thank you. Hugh Biak from City of Goodyear.
Nothing for Goodyear. Thank you.
Kate Drunaski from City of Litchfield Park.
Nothing on our end either.
Austin Kennedy as proxy for Brandon Forey for City of Peoria.
Nothing from Peoria.
Frank Ganani from City of Buckeye.
Hi, Mohammed. Nothing to report from City of Buckeye. Thank you.
Thank you. Tara Harman from Pinal County Public Works. Raymond Huang from City of Chandler.
Nothing to report at this time. Thank you.
Carl Langford from City of Phoenix.
Good morning, everyone. The only thing from City of Phoenix to report, we did recently install our 91st Hawk in the city. And we're making great progress, and we'll probably hit 100 way before we think we should.
Thank you. Janet Martin from Town of Queen Creek.
Nothing at this time. Thank you.
Stephen Chang as proxy for Dana Oziani from City of Surprise.
Nothing to report from the City of Surprise. Thank you.
Clint Emery as proxy for Aaron Pinkerton from Town of Gilbert.
Town of Gilbert doesn't have anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Alice Ryan from University of Arizona.
No updates at the University of Arizona. Thank you.
Thank you. Christopher Salas from Town of Florence.
Nothing to report from the town of Florence.
Are there any members that I have missed online? If not, that concludes the report by the committee members attending virtually, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mohammed. Since this is an information item, no action is requested. I'll move on to item number 9, is for information only. Do any members of the Transportation Safety Committee have topics or issues of interest that they would like to have considered for discussion at future meetings? Please indicate by unmuting to be recognized. You can also send over the request to Margaret or myself via email. Any items? Hearing none at this time. As this is an information item, there's no action requested. Moving on to the last topic or last item, number 10. The next meeting of the Transportation Safety Committee will be a special meeting held at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, April 23rd. Attendance in person is encouraged for HSIP project presentations in the MAG second floor Ironwood room. Virtual options will be available. And this is a action item or this is an information item, so there's no action. The meeting is adjourned at 11:59 and 16 seconds, right before noon. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.